Hi, this is Lori, and welcome to my series on the Pico W. In this episode, we're going to be completing the Hangman game that we started in Part 1. In Part 1, we learned how to use the rotary encoder and get it all set up, and did a few basic parts of our programming that we would need. In this episode, we're going to work on our Python program and get the game to run. Let's get going. In Part 1, I could see that the screen was difficult to see in the camera setting I had, so I decided to blow it up and make sure that we all understand how we're going to lay out this screen on our 1306 display. And here's the title, Hangman. Here's the graphic that will have the gallows, and the hangman will be right here. This is the ground line. And then here's where the word will appear, and initially we'll just see the blanks for the word, and then the letters will fill in on top of the blanks as we guess correct letters. So this can be anywhere from 4 letters up to 8. 8 will fit right up to about here. Then we'll, on the other side here, we'll have a number of misses indicator. And this is the letters available area. So initially all the letters in the alphabet will show, but as we choose various letters, they will be removed from the letters available area, and we'll only see the ones that we can still select from. And then this is the letter selection area, where we rotate through the letters using our rotary encoder. There's a lot of elements to this game. When I first thought of it, I thought it would be pretty simple to code, but it actually takes a fair amount of code to get it to work, or at least it does for the way I thought about how to code it. Sure, my program is not the most efficient, but it was sort of how I thought about it, and as I thought about each major item that the game would need to do, I went in and coded that part of it. So I just thought I'd lay it out because, sometimes when you think about doing a project like this, the best way to go is to kind of divide it up into pieces and then accomplish each piece and then move on to the next, rather than trying to think about programming the whole thing in one big piece. So the first thing when I thought about this project was I thought about putting it on the 1306 display. And as I said in Part 1, I wasn't really sure it would all fit. So the first thing I think when you're making a game like this with the display, mocking it up just to see what it's going to look like on the screen is a good approach. So we showed that mock-up program that I created in Part 1. Then the next thing was using a new component. It was new to me. I hadn't used one before. How do we work the rotary encoder? So you want to go through and just learn the basics around a new component that you're going to include in a project. And so first just learn how the rotary encoder works. And then the next step was we want to use the rotary encoder to select letters. How are we going to go about doing that? So that was the next task that I took on, and I showed the code that we put together for Part 1, in Part 1, on how to do that. The next thing was to get a list of words that we'll choose from to select a word randomly to put into the Hangman game. Now, there's a lot of ways you could have chosen to do this. You could have allowed the user to input words, and maybe make it a 2-player game or something like that, but I decided I would just create a separate file with some interesting electronics programming words in it, and they would be anywhere from 4 to 8 letters, and we'd randomly select one to guess. Next major item was to figure out how to manage the letters available list that we're going to show on the screen. Somehow the user has to know what letters they've already selected and what ones are left for them to choose from. And so I decided to do that by creating a list of the available letters, and then as the user has chosen various letters, I would remove that from the list and then also show that up on the screen as not being in the choices anymore. So that actually was a little bit challenging, and I had to do some digging around to figure out how to do that. Next, I thought it would be good to give the user the number of mistakes they've made, the number of misses, And then also at the same time use that to draw the hangman parts. So we'll need some sort of a variable in our program that will tell us we're up to the 5th miss or the 4th miss, and then which hangman part would go with that number of misses. So that was how I went about tracking that. Then we need to figure out a way to avoid repeat letter selections. I chose not to change the rotary encoder list because that would have meant changing and resetting up the rotary encoder in some way. And maybe there's a different way to do it, but I decided just to leave that alone. So on the rotary encoder part, you'll always see all the letters, but I figured if somebody selects a letter again, then it'll just tell them you picked a repeat and allow them to try again. And then we'll also need to check to see when is the game over. Have they selected all the letters and spelled out the word and they've won? Or have they run out of guesses and the hangman is hung and the game is over? So those are the major things that I think need to be done in the code. And we'll go through the program and see how I programmed those various items. Here's how I put together the words that we could randomly select from for the hangman game. And what's nice about this is you can add words, you could change them out if you want to, so that you can continue to make the game fun to play. I chose to try to pick words that went along with electronics and programming. And then I made lists based on the number of letters for each word, and then put them all together into one big, huge list of lists here. So that's how I went about it in terms of setting up the word list. So it's a separate file, and we'll reach into this to grab our randomly selected word. This is version 2 of Hangman, which includes a lot of print statements to make sure we understand what's happening at each point in the code. Version 3 has all of those taken out. We'll start off with the modules that we'll need. We're going to import the rand_in function from random and our word list so that we can randomly select a word from our word list. We'll set up our display and the encoder and the button, and we'll also define our interrupt function and initialize our request for the interrupt, our dictionary to scroll through with our encoder, and then we get to the first new function that we'll need to do Hangman. In the getWord function, we're going to randomly select a length and a word so that we can pull one of the words out of our all words list of lists. So first we'll get the word length by choosing a random number between 4 and 8. And then we'll need our word in that list. There's 10 words for each word length, and so we'll pull that out as well, and we'll return that randomly selected word from the function. The next function we'll write is to draw the blanks for the word that has been selected. So we'll give it the word length, how many letters are in that word, and these are the pixel start numbers for where the blanks should start in terms of pixels on the screen. And then we'll go through and draw those blanks for the number of letters we have in our word. The next function we'll write is one to show the letters available and from our letters available list. And that'll put that on the screen. So first thing we'll need to do is kind of blank out the area where the letters available are shown. So that'll clear them out with this rectangle. And then we're going to take that list and chop it up into the pieces so that they'll fit on the 4 lines and pull out just the letters we want. And this code here takes that list, joins it all together, and puts it in a string with no spaces in between, and we'll display that on our OLED display. The next function is to print the Hangman parts to the screen, and you can see it's indexed by a variable n, And depending on where we are in terms of how many missed guesses we have, then we'll draw that particular part of the hangman on the screen. Next, we'll need the function to show the current number of misses on the screen. So we'll be able to pass that number to our function. It will clear out the area as we've done in some of our other functions, and then print the new string. So we're kind of creating a string to put on the screen and showing it. Now we're finally to the main program. I'm going to use our normal try and accept so we can gracefully exit the program. And we'll initialize our while true loop. This will start off with putting the hangman title onto our screen, and then the graphic parts of the hangman that are always on the screen, the bars and lines and so forth. Then we'll initialize our letters available to all the letters in the alphabet, and we'll put them on the screen. Next, we'll set up the letter select area like we did in part 1, starting off with letter A. And we'll need to go ahead and randomly choose our word. So we'll get that word, and then we'll also create a list of the letters in that word. And you can see we're printing those to the screen so we can check that out. Next, now that we have our word, we can draw the blanks for our word. And so that's the function that we talked about previously. And then we'll need to print the letters over the blanks when a user guesses them correctly. So these are the starting pixels for where those letters will start. Next, we'll give the maximum number of guesses allowed. And I thought, since some of the words are kind of long, that if it's 7 or 8 characters long, you'll get 10 guesses, but if it's less than that, you'll only get 6. So these allow you to have the extra hands and feet that we could draw onto our hangman. Now you could play with this and decide, what makes it more challenging for you by changing the maximum number of guesses allowed. Now we're going to do a lot of initialization. We'll put the number of misses to 0. We'll show that on the screen. We'll get our first reading from the encoder and set that to val old. We'll set the letter that's currently selected to nothing right now. And we'll have our flag here, stop flag, to stop the program when either the user has run out of guesses and lost, or when the user has correctly guessed the word. And we'll also need to initialize the number correct, because we'll need to count up how many correct letters the user has gotten right, so that we can stop the game when they've actually gotten all the letters in the word, if that's what happens. Now we're to the second while loop that's nested inside of our while true loop. And this loop will continue to run as long as the user still has some guesses left, or the user still hasn't guessed the word correctly. In other words, we don't need to stop the program. It'll keep running through here, allowing you to continue to select letters and continue to either get a letter right or draw more things onto your hangman. So we'll read the rotary encoder, and we'll check to see if the button has been pressed. So a lot of action happens in this part of the code. Once we've selected a letter, then we need to check the letter and see if it's in our word or if it's not in our word. And there's a lot of actions that need to happen here, which is why we have a lot of code. So we'll print to the screen what the letter selected was, just for debugging. And now we want to see, is the letter selected in the letter available list? If it is, we need to remove that letter from the list and also clear it out. So this is what this code here will do. And now we'll re-show the letters available with that one blanked out. We'll print that to the screen just so we can check to make sure that's working correctly. Now, if the letter selected is in our word, Then we're going to look through the word to see what index is that letter so that we can place it in the right place above the blanks. And we'll use this list compression to do that and find the index, and it'll actually find more than one if there happens to be repeated letters in the letter that you've guessed correctly. And so we'll scroll through that and we'll increment the number corrected by how many correct letters we found. Otherwise, that means we didn't find the letter in our word, and you've got a miss. So we're going to increment the miss, and we're going to go ahead and put another part onto the Hangman. And we're also going to update the number of misses and show that to the screen. And now we're going to check and see if the maximum number of guesses have been used. If that's the case, then the game needs to end. And we'll go ahead and tell the user sorry. So we have to kind of clear that spot of the screen up and say sorry. And then we'll go ahead and show them the word that they were trying to guess. And we'll put a stop flag on to say, well, we shouldn't go through the loops anymore. All right, this code runs if the user selects a letter that has already been used. So we'll just tell them that it's a repeat, and we'll continue going from there and then put the number of misses back up. We didn't increment it, we just put them back onto the screen. And then we need to check to see if they've finished the word. If they did guess correctly, have they finished the word? And if so, we're going to say it's time to stop and tell them that they're a winner. Now we're on to the part of the code that checks to see if the encoder has moved. And this is the code that we put together in part 1. And it'll go through and put up the letter that you're switching to and clear out the old one and put that on the screen. Then if we get to this part of the code, it means that we want to give some time, the game is over, and give some time to see the results. Then we'll clear it out and start again, because now we'll go all the way back up to the while true loop and start the game over. And of course, if we press Control-C, we'll clear out the screen and end the game. That was a lot of coding. Let's see this game go. There we go. Now we can see on the screen the word that was randomly selected, positive, and here it is a list, and it has 8 letters in it. And let's go look at our display, and we can see yes, it's an 8-letter word, and everything's still available. We started just where we expected to start. All right, so let's just select something. And so we selected a letter that wasn't found. So that was F. And let's try again. Let's pick a letter that would be found. How about P? Or start a positive. There we go. So doing all right. And again, you can look at the shell and you can see that yeah, we're removing the letters from our letter available list, and they're also, as you can see, not printing onto the screen. So let's select some more, and maybe the O. Let's go ahead and win since we know the word. Why not? And put the B on there, and we'll pop back up and we'll catch the E, and we need an I in there. Yeah, we got a winner. That's awesome. Well, it was a lot of fun putting this together, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll have the link to all the code, and definitely appreciate your feedback. We'll close the game out and end it. Thanks for joining me.